Most people walk every day, but what if they walk wrong? What if you could take the walks you're already doing, but get much more out of them? By learning and using these simple walking hacks, you could turn an ordinary walk into a powerful fat-burning tool. Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about 10 ways that you could get more fat burning out of the walking that you're doing. Number 1, walk before breakfast, or more specifically, walk the first thing you do when you get up in the morning, because not everybody eats breakfast in the beginning of the day. So even if you eat later in the day, your first meal, it's still a great idea to walk the very first thing you do when you wake up. And why is that? Because you are slightly more insulin resistant when you first wake up. And there is something called the dawn phenomenon. Your body releases certain hormones to get you ready for the day, to get you a little bit of energy. So you get some growth hormone, you get some cortisol to raise blood sugar. And that's a normal thing. That's just to get you ready for the day. And if you're insulin sensitive, then that little bump in blood sugar and insulin is appropriate, because it gets you just enough energy to get ready. However, if you are insulin resistant, then that slight increase tends to be too much because your body doesn't regulate it properly. And if you are insulin resistant, now that's a great idea for you to get up and walk, because now you use up some glucose and you help your body get back into balance, to get in a better metabolic place when you first start your day, and you get more ready for fat burning for the rest of the day. And the reason is that when you walk, when you activate muscle, then that muscle can suck up, it can absorb, it can take in that a little bit of extra glucose without using insulin. So normally when you wake up, your body releases a little glucose and it releases a little bit of insulin. But if you walk, it doesn't have to use as much insulin and you're in a much better place. And you also, when you start walking and you just do it very gently, now you are using almost all fat for energy. Because even if you're using up a tiny amount of glucose, that's a fraction of how much fat you would use. You're only using up a gram or two of glucose, because that's just enough to get it back down a few points, but the energy that you're actually using is going to be mostly fat. Hack number 2 is to walk right after you eat. And this should be a very, very gentle walk. You just basically stroll around for 2 to 5 minutes. And the reason you want to be very, very gentle is that your body also wants to send a lot of blood to your intestines, to your digestive system for digestion, for breaking down that food. And if you start walking briskly, now you're going to send a lot of blood to your muscles. So you want to move just enough to get a little bit of circulation and use up a few grams of glucose. Then you're not going to create any conflict there. But it's a great idea to move just a little bit, because anytime you eat, your glucose and your insulin will be higher. Even if you eat a low-carb meal, you will still get an insulin response. And if you move, now just like we said on the previous slide, when you move, you're activating muscles and they can start using that glucose without extra insulin. And therefore, the insulin response after the meal is less than it would have been if you didn't move. But remember, it should be very gentle. This is not the time for your brisk, energetic, intense walk. So when we talk about these 10 hacks, just keep in mind the 7 ways to fat burning. And that is to reduce blood glucose spikes. And we'll do that just like we talked about. A little bit of movement will use up some of the glucose, so there's less of a spike. If we have less of glucose spike, now there's also less of an insulin spike, and the overall levels will be lower than if you didn't move. And the way to do this, like we said, is to increase a little bit of muscle activity, because that's going to use up some of that glucose. It's not that you're burning so many calories, but you're getting into a better metabolic state. Another way that we burn fat is to get our cortisol levels lower overall and have less overall cortisol released through our lifestyle. Next, we want to increase mitochondrial efficiency, because the mitochondria is the place where we burn fat. That's where we oxidize fat and turn it into energy, into ATP. Next, we want to try to increase our fat-burning hormones. And another thing that we get from walking that I want to mention separately, even if it doesn't directly burn fat, is we get an increase in nervous system activation, which is good for absolutely everything in your body. Hack number 3 is to track your steps. And it doesn't really matter what it is. I have a ring that tracks mine. Most phones today will have an app in it. So if you just keep your phone in your pocket, it will track it for you. And knowing is powerful. Simply knowing what you're doing keeps you honest, keeps you from deluding yourself, basically. So a lot of people, maybe you would say that, oh yes, I walk every day, but then you start tracking and you go, oops, I didn't move as much as I thought. Or someone might think, oh, I tracked it and I take 8,000 steps every day, but then once you check, then you're not all that consistent. So maybe most days, or on average, you only get a couple of thousand. And if you track your steps, if you know where your baseline or average is, now it's very easy to improve, to raise that goal a little bit. So if you're at 1,500, maybe you can take it to 3,000. If you are at 5,000, maybe you can take it to 8,000. And what happens a lot is simply by tracking, people will add thousands of steps every day. Tracking also promotes consistency, and it is habit forming. And that's the type of habit that we want. That's the good kind. Hack number 4 is to do what's called zone 2 walking. And that means that you increase your activity. You have a level of intensity where you're just below the point where you start huffing and puffing, where you start breathing very fast and heavy. And there are a few different ways to gauge that. One would be that you can speak a sentence in 1 to 2 breaths. If you start huffing and puffing, then it's almost like you take a breath for every couple of words. Now that's too intense. But it also shouldn't be so slow that you could speak a long sentence or a paragraph in a single breath, because now you're not doing enough. Another way would be that you can breathe comfortably through your nose as you're walking, that you don't have to snort like a horse and sort of have a lot of effort in the breathing. And why is it that you want to walk or exercise that way? Well, think about what happens when you're short of breath. What happens when you start breathing faster and you start panting? What that means is your body is looking for more oxygen. The oxygen that you're getting from the slow breath is not enough to support your increased activity. And as soon as you start panting and huffing and puffing, what happens is your body is releasing cortisol, because if the air isn't enough, it needs to find another way of making energy. And that means it raises cortisol to raise blood sugar, and now you're breaking down glucose through glycolysis. You're making lactic acid instead of burning fat. So as soon as you start breathing harder, you increase cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and you also reduce the percentage of fat burning. You're not purely burning fat anymore. But as long as you keep it in this comfortable zone 2, where you could speak a sentence, now what's happening is you're burning almost all fat, and you're optimizing your mitochondrial efficiency, because the mitochondria is the little thing inside your cell. It's your energy factory, and it only operates on using oxygen to oxidize fat. It can oxidize glucose also, but the preferred pathway, if you're providing oxygen, is to burn fat. So that's what's going to happen. And at that level of intensity, you're still building some aerobic capacity. Not enough to compete in races or anything, but you're getting more fit. You're getting healthier aerobically, but you're doing it without a bunch of cortisol spikes. You're not constantly stressing your body with cortisol and getting blood sugar spikes and insulin, and you're not stressing your metabolic system. Hack number 5 is to emphasize arm swing. And most people would tell you that that's because it increases your energy usage. It burns more calories and it gets some level of core activation. When you swing your arms more, now you're rotating your body, so you're getting more of the core muscles involved, which is a good thing. But that reason pales in comparison. And if you watch it closely, you can see it pale in comparison to the brain activation that you're getting. You're increasing brain activation. And it's not just the amount of increased brain activation, but it's the type. And we have to understand how important arm swing is. So when we walk, we put one arm forward and the opposite leg forward, and that's called a normal gait. It's called a cross crawl gait. And this is the most fundamental pattern in your nervous system. When your nervous system starts shaping, when you're an infant, then you start crawling. First, you're lying down, and then you raise your head, and you get your first curve, and then you start crawling. And the way you crawl is in a cross-crawl pattern. And this starts shaping your nervous system for the rest of your life. And this pattern is so fundamental and so important to human function that if you skip, if you had a parent that put you in one of those bouncy things in the doorway, instead of having you crawl, and you didn't crawl enough before you started walking, your chances are your nervous system did not create all the necessary patterns. And what we're seeing is with those people who skipped crawling, there is a much greater incidence of dyslexia. There is an incidence of less balance. You have poorer balance. You have poorer coordination. And as a result, you are more accident prone. Now, the good news is they have studied this, and for kids with dyslexia, even if they're teenagers, they can still go back to crawling, and at least to some degree, they can start recreating these patterns and strengthen and increase the complexity of their nervous system and their wiring so they're functioning better. But that's how important arm swing is. So when you walk, if you practice arm swing, you're doing yourself a favor on so many levels. And what you want to notice when you're walking, and you can even have somebody watch you, and what you want to see is that you're swinging the same amount front to back. So when you're walking, you swing a certain amount forward and you swing a certain amount backwards. And forward is going to be more. That's not what I'm saying, but it should be the same amount on the left and the right side. And that's very important for brain balance. And so you compare the left and the right, and you make sure that they're balanced. And then you make sure that you're swinging in a proper plane. So when you're walking, the arm is supposed to swing in slightly in front of the body. So you don't walk with the arm swing like this, where you're swinging out. That's not natural, because the shoulder plane, the way that your arm hangs on your torso, is at a slight angle, and it is much more normal to swing it in just a little bit. So don't force it, but also don't try to walk straight. Make sure that you allow yourself for the hand to swing in just a couple of inches. It's somewhere about 5 to 10 degrees. And by paying attention to all of these, you're going to improve your posture, you're going to improve your symmetry, and you're going to improve your brain function. Hack number 6 is to walk in nature if you can, if you have access. Find some natural surroundings. If you have a hiking trail, great. If you have a park, that's good too. And whether you do or you don't, try really to actively appreciate your surroundings, actively appreciate your ability to walk and the rhythm and how well you're walking. If you actively appreciate it, now you get in a better mood and you're going to reduce cortisol and you're going to reduce the amount of stress. Your state is going to change and you're going to improve your overall relaxation response. It means you will heal better and you get more out of the walk. And as a result, chances are that you will have improved sleep, improved mood, and improved fat loss. Hack number 7 is interval walking. So here what you do is you change it up a little bit. You just don't get out and walk the same pace the whole time. You could, for example, walk 1 minute fast and 1 minute slow, or 2 minutes fast and 2 minutes slow, or 30 seconds. It doesn't really matter. Just change it up. And what happens when you're walking faster, when you're walking more intensely, is you're activating some stress hormones and you're activating some human growth hormones. And I know we talked about how we don't want to activate stress, but it's a question of how much. A little bit of stress is really good, but we can't keep it for a long duration. So here we're still walking. We're not running. We're not sprinting. We're just increasing the pace a little bit. And then we don't keep it up so long that we create a lot of stress. So short duration. So the way I want to think about these intervals is you're not necessarily doing a whole lot more. But if this is the intensity and this is the duration, now when you're walking faster, you increase intensity. When you're walking slower, you're resting a bit. And you do this a few times. But if you had walked at the same pace, you might keep on average about the same level of intensity on average. But what you're getting from changing it up is you are saving your body. You're alternating the movement pattern. So when you're walking faster, you're stretching your muscles and ligaments a little bit more. You're using the muscles and joints in a different way. And then when you're slowing down and you're resting, now you're recovering. So it's not like you're just out there at the same level and wearing and wearing and wearing. But when you wear a little bit more and you allow your body to recover, it's actually much less stressful on your body. And because you're not fatiguing the muscles with a continuous effort, you're also getting less stress on your joints and your ligaments. And another huge benefit is that any time that you change things up, you're creating more complex patterns in your nervous system. You're teaching your body different things. You're teaching your body more. Hack number 8 is to do your walking on hills or stairs or on an incline. And this is kind of a variation of the interval training. And what happens when you're walking uphill now is you're increasing the intensity. And again, you're using more energy, more calories, if you will, but that's not really the point. But what's really happening here is that you're increasing the intensity, especially in large muscle groups. You're utilizing more muscle fibers, a greater percentage of muscle fibers, so it's a greater challenge for your body, and that's a good thing. What also happens is when you're walking uphill or upstairs, it reduces the joint stress, because the greatest stress of walking stairs, for example, is walking down the stairs, not up. When you walk up something, what happens is that you're leaning forward ever so slightly and you're activating more of these large muscles, the quad and the glute muscles. And when you're walking downstairs or flat, you're not using the glutes much at all, but when you walk up, now you do. But because it's a greater intensity, just like the intervals, it's a really good thing to combine this with intervals. So if it is more intense walking uphill, but you don't want to get into that stress zone, then do it a little bit harder and then you recover. But I always wonder, when someone says that you should do your exercise going all uphill because it's less stress on your joints, then how do you get back home? Because at some point you have to get down, right? So here's the trick. What you do is you walk a little bit faster uphill. That's where you get your increased intensity. That's where you get your interval. And then to save your joints, you walk slower downhill. You use the downhill for your recovery and you walk very carefully. Or if you're at work maybe and they have an elevator, then what you could do is you could walk up the stairs. You take the stairs up and get your exercise, and then you take your elevator down. Now you're still activating larger muscle groups, you're still saving your joints, and you're getting all these benefits. And unfortunately, what I hear and see a lot is people do the exact opposite. They walk downstairs because it's easier and they take the elevator up because it's too much effort. Hack number 9 is to do your walking with weights. And there's several different ways. You could wear a backpack. You could wear some hand weights, hold them in your hands. You could wear a weight vest. And what happens is you increase the intensity. It becomes a little bit harder. And one benefit would be that you increase the weight bearing, because weight bearing exercise is a stress on your bones. So if you stress your bones, your body will have a tendency to deposit more minerals in your skeleton. So it's good for bone density. And you also increase some muscle activation, especially if you walk with a little bit of a spring. However, and I have to say, this is not my favorite. This is probably my least favorite hack out of these. And out of these weights, I would say that my favorite is to use the weight vest if you do this. And here is why. You don't want to compromise your mechanics. Remember how important I said it was with arm swing and proper mechanics and proper posture. Well, the more you interfere with your body's normal movement pattern, the more you compromise all that. So if you're going to add some weight, I'm not opposed to that, but make sure that you don't compromise your mechanics, especially not your arm swing. Make sure that you can still walk comfortably and freely and have a normal and full gait with full arm swing. And hack number 10 is to do multiple mini walks. It is much, much better to walk several times and walk less each time. So if you get out 3 to 6 times a day, even for just 2 to 5 minutes. And that's what we're talking about with a lot of these hacks, like before breakfast and after dinner, after a meal. It's not about how much you do. It's the fact that you just do something that makes a huge difference. And multiple short walks is much better than taking one long walk, like maybe 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And the reason is that you're changing things up. You're interrupting the pattern. You're giving your body a reason to do something. And that improves your insulin control. It improves your metabolic activation. It improves, like we said, nervous system activation. And in terms of abdominal fat reduction, in terms of fat burning, it is better even for that. So it's not about the total amount of calories. It is more about how much do you activate your body? How much do you activate your metabolism and your nervous system? And how much do you change things up and give your body a reason to adapt? If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.